Welcome, everybody. How y'all doing? Wow. Thank you very much for being here. This is important. This is the first time that CafeMom has been able to bring together a group of moms. You all are going to decide this election. You vote more than the average American. You care more than the average American. There's a level of fear in this room right now. And this is your opportunity to ask the presidential candidates direct questions that will affect your parents, it'll affect your kids, it'll affect your families, it'll affect your careers, everything. CafeMom has brought this together to give you the chance to be heard and to give the presidential candidates the chance to respond. And I particularly appreciate those who brought their children here so that they have a chance to be represented, because in the end, what they decide to do over the next 4 or 8 years are going to affect your son and the other people like you. And I also want to point out our mom in uniform. I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for your service.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Ferrier with CafeMom.com, the #1 mom site on the internet. We've got about 9 million unique monthly visitors. So there are a lot of people out there who are very eager to hear what you have to say, Speaker Gingrich. One of the things that we've noticed over and over again is that while they see your policies and your plans on the news, they really want to get to know who you are personally. I see that you've brought your family with you here today. Can you introduce them to us briefly?
Well, my wife Calista is right here. You want to wave? Stand, maybe everybody can meet you. One of my 2 favorite daughters, Kathy, is right here. And my other favorite daughter, Jackie, is right here. And my grandson, Robert, is right here. Jump up. And my granddaughter, Maggie. And I should say, and Maggie has brought, because they're campaigning with us this week, Maggie's brought her friend, Georgia, who's also here. So.
Now, by all accounts, you are very close with your daughters and your grandchildren. I've read that Jackie,
they're my 2 favorites.
Of course. I've read that you talk to your dad every single day.
Talk or email. We do a lot of communicating.
And that's amazing. I mean, I think every mom in here would say that that's a rare bond. Given the fact that your daughters did not grow up in the most perfect of situations, how have you maintained that personal connection with them as adults and with your grandchildren?
I think you have to work at it. You have to decide that having a relationship with your children is of value, and that you're going to put in the time and the effort and the conversations, and go on vacation, be together to solve problems, try to do things that where you get together and say, you know, what kind of life do you want? How can I help you have a better life? You know, we've continued that down with, you know, Maggie and Robert. We want them to have a great life. You know, so.
Now that you are a grandparent, and I love asking every grandparent this question, in hindsight, what do you wish that you had done differently as a father when your girls were growing up?
Oh, my daughters are so terrific. I wouldn't, I don't, look, I mean, in a different world, it would have been great not to have been divorced. In a different world, it would have been great, I think, at times, to have been able to talk more openly and to solve some of our problems more openly than we did. But I think all 3 of us worked through it in ways that I don't think there was ever a single week in that whole process that we weren't aware of each other and trying to do things together. You know, and they both become tremendous. And Calista and I have enormous pride in watching. Jackie's doing a great job with Maggie and Robert. Kathy has been just tremendous, and she's had rheumatoid arthritis since she was about 25, and she has mastered it, and she has been disciplined. She now walks marathons. And so watching her life with her husband, Paul, and Jimmy, who, is Jimmy not here? Paul and Jimmy, Jimmy's here, there's Jimmy. No, there's Paul, too. These are my 2 son-in-laws. And not just, okay, no, these are my 2 favorite son-in-laws. And not to start anything, but the younger one over there, Jimmy, is an Atlanta Falcons fan. The other one, Paul, is a Green Bay Packer shareholder. I'm not in any way saying that this means much, but Calista and I do own 1 share of Packer stock. But we love Atlanta and we love Jimmy, so it's okay.
These moms, when we did a survey for CafeMom, these moms talked with great intrepidation about the future. So many of them, and I'll ask you just for a show of hands, how many of you are afraid that your children will not have the same quality of life that you had when they grew up? Virtually every mom. This is something that the president can do something about. As president, specifically, what would you do not only to address their anxiety, but what are the solutions so that the next generation will have it better than this generation?
Well, let me say to all of you, I always tell audiences that I don't ask anyone to be for me. Because if you're for me, you're going to vote and go home and say, I hope he fixes it. And I think I'm a little less confident than Frank is. I think presidents can have an impact, but presidents actually only have the impact the American people give them. Ronald Reagan was effective because he could communicate clearly with the American people, and the American people then communicated clearly with the Congress. And so I think it has to be a team effort. By the way, I share your concerns. I think that if we don't have profound change in Washington, we are inevitably going to decay. And the major reason that Clist and I walked through and spent almost a year deciding to run is I don't want to leave Maggie and Robert a country which is poorer, weaker, and more at danger than the country that our parents worked and fought to give us. And I think we have to have a whole new approach to politics, and we have to have a willingness to deal with very large solutions and to do it together and to bring people together to solve things. Now, I think it can be done. And if you go to newt.org, you'll see layer after layer. Some people would say I have too many ideas. But I think when you have a country this big and this much trouble, it takes a fair number of ideas to begin to fix it and get it back in shape. And that's what this campaign is all about, is setting a path that's designed to create jobs, economic growth, national security, and reassert the core values that start with the Declaration of Independence and the belief that our rights come from our Creator. And if you could get right the economy, national security, and the core values of American exceptionalism, this would be a remarkably successful country, and you could feel good about what you were leaving your children with.
So what are the three priorities? You gave a general response. For them who are looking for specifics, what are your three priorities?
Well, you have to fix the economy.
By doing what?
By cutting taxes, cutting regulations, building an American energy plan. Exactly what Reagan did. I was very delighted yesterday to have Dr. Art Laffer come and endorse me because he helped develop the Reagan plan in the 70s. I worked with him. We took that Reagan plan, it worked, created millions of jobs. We did the same thing when I was Speaker.
Cutting taxes for everybody.
Cutting taxes for everybody.
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 Including millionaires.
Sure. Look, my interest is economic growth. I know how to create jobs. I'm not into redistribution. The best thing you can do to solve the distribution gap in America is get every poor person a job. And if they have a job, if they have a job and they learn the work ethic and they start getting better education, they'll fix redistribution because they'll rise. And their children will be even better off than they are. And politicians taking from one group to give to another group is a disaster because it teaches everybody who's successful to leave the country. And every country that's tried this has found it just drives successful people out of the country. So that's a big difference. I'd have a lot less regulations.
Such as?
Well, such as an environmental protection agency, which the mayor of a small town in western Iowa said to me that her town is going to have to double its electricity rate to meet an EPA requirement. And she said, I already have senior citizens who wear their coat all day because they can't afford to heat their house. And they want me to double the electricity rate? She said, these are uncaring bureaucrats sitting in Washington, D.C. who do not have any idea where my town is or who my people are. This woman, by the way, is the first female mayor of her town and has been mayor for 16 years. And part of it is because she really worries about the people in her town. So take EPA as an example. I think the third thing you got to have is an American energy program. And I am unashamedly in favor of biofuels, including ethanol and soy diesel, for a practical reason. If my choice is the next $1 billion goes to Saudi Arabia or it goes to South Dakota, I pick South Dakota. If the next $1 billion goes to Iran or it goes to Iowa, I pick Iowa. I would like us to become so energy independent that no American president ever again bows to a Saudi king or walks arm in arm with a Saudi king.
you were talking about the environment. I know that that's an issue that's near and dear to the hearts of many moms, particularly because we want our children to inherit a clean planet. I have many friends whose children can't go outside and play in the summertime because their asthma acts up, because the air is not clean enough. I know in Atlanta it's a big issue. People are asked to stay at home on very hot, smoggy days. What would you do to ensure that these moms are heard, that the air is clean, that the water is clean?
Well, the first thing I'd say is we should put in perspective where we are. I taught environmental studies at West Georgia College in the early 1970s. And I taught in the Second Earth Day. And when I was teaching back then, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught fire. Now, I tell my most conservative friends, you know, when you have a river so polluted it catches fire in a major city, you need environmental regulations in order to clean it up. And so I'm for cleaning things up, but I'm for cleaning them up at a rational level in a way that's economically sustainable. What I wouldn't do is allow the EPA to crush the electricity industry of this country, which will drive all manufacturing out of the United States and kill several million more jobs. So how do you go through a process of change? You know, Iowa is a perfect example. You now produce more electricity from wind than any other place on the planet except Denmark. Now, it's been successful. The farmers like getting the money. No, you know, unlike Cape Cod, nobody here has complained. And the fact is that it is a program that is a piece of the future. It's not the whole future.
We've got our first question, and please tell me the name of your son.
Oh, Kinnick, K-I-N-N-I-C-K.
And how old is he?
They're laughing because he's named after Niall Kinnick, who was the Heisman Trophy winner, which the University of Iowa's football stadium is named after Niall Kinnick.
And by the way, if this were Chicago, he'd be voting.
And ironically, my husband, who went to Iowa State, chose his name. So,
Wait. You got your husband went to Iowa State, and you got him to pick the University of Iowa Heisman Trophy.
I went to Iowa, so, but I didn't. I wasn't.
This mom's in charge.
Yeah. I'm a public school teacher. I teach at a local high school here, and I am a member of the teachers union, but I do have some difficulty with some of the things that the teachers unions are doing. And my question is, how would you handle education and the teachers unions? Because even though I'm a member of them, I do it for legal protection, basically. I have a huge problem with, for example, how they're handling like teacher seniority. I see a lot of my friends that are young teachers losing their jobs, and older teachers, frankly, that are taking up space, get to stay just because they've been there for a while.
Well, I think that most education things should be at the local level and at the state level, not Washington. But let me offer a couple principles. I taught a long time ago in a public high school, and then I taught in college a good while. I think that, first of all, we should reduce the bureaucracy in Washington very, very dramatically and reduce the red tape and bring things back home, not just to Des Moines, but all the way back home to local county offices and to local schools. We should empower parents a lot more, but with the proviso that we need discipline in the schools and that we need to reestablish the principle that students should actually obey teachers, and that we go back to the old-time model that said basically, if you're in trouble with your teacher, you're in trouble with your parents. Let me say two things about the teachers union. One, I would encourage every state to adopt a co-op insurance program that was directly competitive with the teachers union, so that you could choose whether you needed to pay your union dues to get your insurance, or you could just pay it direct, and that way you wouldn't have to be a union member in order to get the protection that you need. Because I think in a lot of states, it's seeking protection that gives them an artificially big number of members. The other thing I'd say is I think we have to have a head-on argument about this. I believe the purpose of schools is to educate children. I did something last year that some people thought was very daring, and I'm sure some of my opponents would even say was zany. But I went with the Reverend Al Sharpton, and we went around talking about charter schools. And the reason I went with Reverend Al Sharpton is, if you're in inner city Philadelphia, and you're in a meeting in which every single elected official except one is black, I have no standing. You know, I'm a Southern Republican conservative. But Al Sharpton had a lot of standing. And I was there with him as he said to the elected officials, don't you tell me you're going to back a bad teacher and ruin children. He said the biggest civil rights issue of the 21st century is every child's right to be in a room that is safe, learning from a teacher who is competent, with their parents involved, and we have to solve this. And I would say to the teachers union, if you don't decide that the children come first, and you're not prepared to either retrain or get rid of bad teachers, you will have lost any moral authority to be engaged in education with our children.
We have another question from a mom now.
For being here, Newt. I appreciate your solutions and I appreciate your very specific answers, and that's what I'm looking for today. So my question is, what is your strategy to attract Democrats and independents in a general election? No canned answer. Please be as specific as you can. Thank you.
The pain of thinking that you think I'd have a canned answer. Look, I've helped design campaigns for a long time. I first got active as a high school junior in Columbus, Georgia. My dad was stationed there in the U.S. Army. So I actually worked in the Nixon Lodge campaign as a volunteer. This room is bigger than the Georgia Republican Party in 1960. I ran for Congress in a district where I had to get Democratic and independent votes. I couldn't win. When I started, there were no federal elected officials. Both of my daughters here can tell you that they were essentially used as child labor to get myself in trouble again, because they were out putting on bumper stickers and handing out brochures, and Dad would say to them, "This will be fun." And I'll tell all of you, somewhere around the 7th grade, they suddenly have friends that don't particularly want to go, and they go, "Well, you know, Dad, I'm sure it is fun, and I hope you have a lot of it." But I have to tell them. So I've had experience my whole life. I worked with the Reagan campaign in 1980. He drew in an enormous number of Democrats and independents. He was a former Democrat. I worked in 1988 when George H.W. Bush was behind by 19 points in May, and we had to get independents and Democrats. In 1994, with the Contract with America, we ran a totally positive campaign, and we ended up with the largest one-party increase in American history, 9 million new votes. He was involved in this. And the key to that campaign, which he helped us understand, was you had to be positive, because independents and Democrats hated partisanship. And so we designed and stayed with for 6 months a deliberately positive campaign which drew in people. I would run, first of all, on big issues, on American issues. I'm not running to be the Republican president. I'm running to be the American president. 79% of the country wants an American energy plan. 79%. About the same number of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. To take an example. Over 90% of the country believes our rights come from our Creator and that we should honor and respect that. Over 90%. So if you pick the right fights, and I'll just give you one simple example. President Obama has been the most successful food stamp president in history. And I don't mean this as an attack, but it's a fact. I mean, more people are on food stamps today than ever before. I would like to be the most successful paycheck president in history. And if you go into any neighborhood of any ethnic background anywhere in America, and you say, would you rather your children had food stamps or paychecks? There is a big potential majority of Democrats and independents willing to work with you if you're willing to run as an American and not just as a Republican partisan.
But allow me as a pollster, if you take a look at you and Mitt Romney, among independents and Democrats, Romney runs ahead of you in head-to-heads in almost every survey versus Barack Obama. And I know that a priority among Republican moms is to be successful in the fall. Why would you be the most electable candidate against the field?
Well, at this point in 1979, Ronald Reagan was running 30 points behind Jimmy Carter, because the news media image of Ronald Reagan was such that he had a real deficit. Over the course of the year, as the people got to know Ronald Reagan, it turned out he carried more states against Carter than FDR carried against Herbert Hoover in 1932. So let me start from there. I have a very simple test for all of you. It's October of next year. Obama has $1 billion to spend on the kind of negative advertising you've been watching here over the last few weeks. It comes down to a series of debates. Who do you think could go on that platform against Barack Obama and effectively articulate your values, defend your beliefs, and communicate his failures without flinching. And I just want to suggest, based on the first 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever the number is debates, almost everybody seems to think that I'm a more effective debater than Mitt Romney. He's not a bad guy, I'm just saying. I'm a more effective debater. I'm a more coherent conservative. I've had a longer tradition. I first worked with Ronald Reagan on communications in 1974. And I think that I can debate Barack Obama and beat him decisively by simply telling the truth in a pleasant way that the country says, yep, we want paychecks, we don't want more food stamps. I don't think we're...
Mr. Speaker, I have a question about the national debt. I have a very high level of anxiety about getting Obama out of the Oval Office and replacing him with the right person. Could you please describe what your plan would be to pay off the national debt so we're not passing it along to our children and grandchildren?
That's a very good question. It's one I worry about, obviously, because I don't want Maggie and Robert to have to pay for my credit card. And I think what you have now is a generation of politicians who are running up their credit card and plan to leave the debt to their children and grandchildren, which I think is just, frankly, immoral. The first place you can start, so it's not just theory, when I became Speaker, the Congressional Budget Office projected that over the next 10 years we would borrow an additional $2.7 trillion. 4 years later, when I left, the Congressional Budget Office projected we'd have surpluses of $2.3 billion. That's a $5 trillion swing in 4 years, and that was working with Bill Clinton as a liberal Democrat. So I want to start with that. Now, how do you do it? One, you control spending. You start by saying how much money's come in, that's how much we're going to spend.
So where are you going to cut?
Huh?
Where are you going to cut?
Well, I think, first of all, you could close the Department of Energy tomorrow morning and you'd have more energy. And, you could dramatically shrink the Department of Education and return the student loan program to the private sector, and you'd have more education and better loans. I mean, you can go down a list of these kind of things. You can apply Lean Six Sigma, the Strong America Now people, all of you seen here in town. They think they can save $500 billion a year. Now, that doesn't solve everything, but $500 billion here, $500 billion there. I think, frankly, Governor Perry had a good idea. All foreign aid ought to be on the table, and we ought to review all foreign aid and find out why we're spending it. So my only point is there are 2 phases, or 3 phases. Control spending, reform the systems. We reformed welfare. 2 out of 3 people went to work or went to school. It's the most successful entitlement reform in your lifetime. The third phase, though, is economic growth. I mean, the key to our balancing the budget for 4 straight years is we got unemployment down to 4.2%. If we had unemployment today at 4.2%, remember what happens. You take people off of welfare, off of food stamps, off of Medicaid, off of public housing, off of unemployment. You get them taking care of their family and paying taxes. So you have an increase in revenue with no tax increase, and you have a decrease in spending. It's the biggest single step back towards a balanced budget.